Hello, this is a full discussion I had with Daniel from Safing, where we go into depth of digital security. I asked Daniel about his thoughts on the current state of security, which, even after 50 years of internet technology, is still not good enough. We also wanted to discuss what you can do to protect yourself from cybercrime. In this endeavor, we identified three main threat models: from a basic hacker through a non-targeted data gathering and infiltration to a targeted nation-state campaign. With this layout, we discuss what tools and behaviors are best suited for your cyber self-defense. I hope you find this talk valuable and interesting to listen to on your daily commute or alongside your manual work routine. Enjoy! Hello, Daniel. Thank you very much for coming here on my channel. I've been told by David from Safing that you are the security expert, and David told me on multiple occasions that he goes to you regarding any security questions. So I would like to kindly ask you if you could introduce yourself to this audience and tell us more about yourself and what you do.
First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to this time talking with you about security.
You're welcome.
Thanks. So hi, I'm Daniel. I am CTO and co-founder of Safing, a company that builds powerful and easy privacy tools. My background is in IT security, which started out with just wanting more privacy. So in 2011, I started hosting my own email and starting getting rid of Google. Then in 2013, a little bit into the process, at that point I was actually literally studying IT security. And then Snowden came along and gave all these documents to the journalists. And this really opened my eyes about both the technical capabilities and the social impact that the absence of privacy has on us. And after this realization, it got me thinking, well, what can I do about that, and how can we maybe empower average people, all these people without any technical knowledge about the issue, and they just don't know what's going on, and they don't know how to defend themselves, and to enable them to have more privacy online. And this ultimately led me to found a company in 2017. And I then got two amazing co-founders on board later that year, which David is one of them that you already mentioned. We have received lots of funding since then, and we're currently working on getting our first product out of the door, which is like kind of a brand new VPN alternative. And if you'd like to know more about how we roll and what we're about, then please visit us at safing.io.
Okay.
To finish up my introduction, I'd like to put everything I say here today in perspective. I have lots of knowledge about security, technical security and like theoretic security, especially regarding personal security, but I've never worked as a professional pen tester, a penetration tester, someone who like breaks into systems, or a security analyst or auditor. So I don't have all the experience to back up all my theoretical knowledge. Nevertheless, I am confident that I can point you in the right direction on almost any security topic that we're going to cover here today.
Right. That's definitely more than I do. So I'm very happy that you came here, and this is obviously going to be part of another security tutorial that I will release alongside with this video. But I'm very fascinated that we are going to actually have like a very long, in-depth talk about digital security. Because security is very, very complicated, and I've been quite avoiding this topic on my own because it's a very complex issue and requires a lot of personalization. It's on case by case basis, and there are a lot of technical aspects in there, and somehow it's necessary to to bring it to the wider audience and teach them how to better protect themselves, because you mentioned the Snowden leaks, and the reality is, as I see the world today, is that most people are just naked in the wild of the internet, and they need to be protected. Otherwise, they can get horribly abused or damaged by bad security on the internet and digital space. So what would you say is the state of security currently in 2019?
So I'm gonna repeat one like a very interesting analogy that one of my lecturers at the university like to tell. That is the analogy to like car security. So when we first had cars, when first cars were invented, there wasn't security at all, and people were just dying horribly. And it took some time until we realized that's not a thing, and we really have to change how cars work to get them secure. And what happened is that the car changed fundamentally on how it works and how it's built. And that's the same process we're going through now with information technology, is that we have to, from the ground up, rework everything to make it secure. In the 1970s, when the internet kind of started out, nobody even thought about security. Well, there was just no reason to. And the problem is we're still using loads of protocols and technology that was built back then, and it's just not suitable for the digital world that we have now. So we're in this process, and there are a couple of things I think that are happening at the moment. We have, so principally, there's like why are things insecure? Security vulnerabilities arise. So the theory, when there's a misunderstanding between two entities, either a client, a server, or a human misunderstanding a programming language. So it's just technology that's used incorrectly that creates gaps in the concept and how it works, and that then is used by hackers to make systems do things that they were not meant to do. That's also what the term hacking means, is to just make something do something that it wasn't meant to do, or wasn't meant to do in that way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like having loads of knowledge about a system and then trying to like kind of twist it or turn it in a way to make it do things to your liking.
Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be holes in the system that can be twisted.
Exactly. We're never gonna reach a state where like we're gonna have perfect systems. There's always gonna be humans involved, and humans always make errors.
So when you say that everything needs to be worked from ground up, because we are still based in 1970s technology, and we are using it en masse in 2019. So what do you think that needs to change? Like are the HTTP protocols bad, or are the web interface, is that all wrong?
There are multiple aspects of this. So the first one, of course, is like plain security, where HTTPS is slowly being kind of not replaced but enhanced by HTTPS. The S stands for security, and so we're starting to encrypt everything. And something I just started recently, in the last couple months actually, is all these DNS over HTTPS and DNS over TLS, which is finally a big push to encrypt DNS queries, which up until now were just as they were in the last century. and we're just slowly adapting all these new technologies to make us more secure. HTTP itself is quite okay, I think, but still we're getting upgrades in terms of HTTP 2, where we finally have better ways to distribute content and all that stuff. But security-wise, it's mostly about replacing old protocols with new ones or enhancing old protocols. So another big thing that's happening right now is the internet uses a protocol that advertises where something is. So in order for the internet to route to your packets to a server that you want to access, it has to know where that server is. So that server or that network advertises itself on the internet. And for a very long time, and this is also still the case for a big chunk of the internet, these advertisements are not somehow verified. So anybody can just come here and say, hey, well, you know that Google network, I own that, and so please send all your traffic to me. And many systems will just start doing that. And that's called, if you want to look that up, it's called PGP hijacking, where you kind of like hijack an IP address on the internet, because everyone is like kind of expected to behave, but there's no security concept to this. And slowly we're adapting new additional protocols or upgrade protocols that actually do some verification on that.
Okay. That's another problem with this that you mentioned, that somebody can just hijack other people's positions or servers, and the problem is that the internet doesn't really have borders, and it's a global network, and you have no idea who you're interacting with, and now you're saying that there is not even any way to verify it, or there has not been and is now just being implemented, and it seems like there's been 40 or 50 years of progress that could have been made but has not been made. And so why do you think that is? Why do you think that until very recently all of the internet traffic was virtually unprotected, and it was just all plain text, all the messages and everything was just flowing through the internet, and that's how the NSA built most of its programs. And so why was that?
So yeah, especially pre the Snowden revelations, loads of traffic was unencrypted, and because nobody saw the reason to, because if you ask a server operator, why don't you use HTTPS, they just don't see the benefit, and it's just a hassle for them. And that's the same with where we're still stuck with IP version 4 and not using IP version 6. It's just such a hassle for all these people, for all these operators to understand new technology, to implement it correctly. Then you'll have downtimes because you misconfigured something and all this stuff. So it just boils down to it's work. It's a lot of work, and it costs a lot of money. And if there's not a compelling reason to change something that works, it won't be.
But that's imagine you go onto an airplane, and the airline that you're traveling with is not even checking their aircraft, or making security checks or verifying, and if something goes wrong and the airplane crashes, they are not even responsible. That would be crazy. You would never take a flight, and somehow on the internet this is considered to be a norm or acceptable.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I always wonder, why is this the case? Why don't people take more precautions, or okay, so it's a hassle for the businesses, but if there is a security breach in the business, isn't that a cost to the business?
It is, but the problem with security in companies is, if it works, you don't feel it. That means it's really hard for management to somehow see the value of it,
Yeah.
because they never hear about it. If everything goes well, they never hear about security issues. They never hear about that something has gone wrong because it works. It's only when um, there's a problem that they realize, well, we have to throw more money at it at some point. And that's when all the security teams and companies get a lot more budget to work with. But often that doesn't happen until something happens. But
Okay,
what's really good in that aspect is the GDPR, because with the huge fines, that's something that CEOs acknowledge and see. They see, okay, there might be a huge fine, so it might be cheaper just to invest a little more in security before and not have to pay a fine. And that's I think a really great thing in that aspect, that companies should start investing in more in security. And there are really good examples without GDPR even in recent years. There we had this amazingly huge attack that Maersk got hit with, this huge shipping company, and the security teams afterwards, they had like an unlimited budget. They could buy whatever they wanted, and it didn't matter how much it cost. And the same goes with Aramco. I think it was Aramco. There was a really good podcast about that from the Darknet Diaries podcast, about that story where this company got hacked really bad, and they just looked for someone to handle all this stuff, found someone, and they were like, you have seemingly unlimited budget. So that person just went out and just built the dream team of security and got everyone that they knew was really good, and paid them enormous amounts of money to quit their jobs and come to work at the company. But that didn't happen until they were breached, until there was massive amounts of damage. And they could have prevented that if they just invested like 100th of it before, but they didn't.
Yeah, this seems to be the case, because there is actually a business from selling security vulnerabilities, which is, very strange, because most of these businesses that are selling security vulnerabilities are selling them to nation or like state sponsored or nationwide adversaries that have enough money to buy them. And this is very strange, because when it comes to Apple or other companies, but Apple in the most recent case had huge not data breaches, like huge security vulnerabilities in the iOS system. And one of the main criticisms of Apple was that they did not try to hunt for these security vulnerabilities and exploits in the wild. They did not spend enough on security, and they were actually offering like 5 times less for discovering these vulnerabilities to the people who show it to Apple, as opposed to the businesses that are willing to sell these vulnerabilities to hackers and statewide state-sponsored adversaries. So it was like something like Apple was offering like $200,000 for a 0-day vulnerability. Now they changed it to 1 million, but now like the top price for an Apple 0-day vulnerability is still about $2 million. So Apple is still falling short, and that makes me wonder, why is it the case that it's so crystal clear that Apple should invest even more into security, but they are not. They just recently increased their reward for discovering 0-day vulnerabilities to 1 million, but it's still not enough. Why don't they just spend more?
Well, I think it's a tactical decision. or more like a strategic decision, where the limit is what they're willing to spend. I'm not sure if matching the current market price is a good idea, because you just drive up the price.
Mm-hmm.
Because adversarial nation state will always pay more than Apple. And if you just like pump the price, there would just be more people looking for vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And Apple is still not the one who's going to be like offered to them. And that's a thing that with people that find these vulnerabilities and report them, they never did it solely for, at least I think they never do it solely for the money, but they have some part of them is also trying to like do good.
Yeah.
Because if not, they just sell them on the black market.
Yeah.
Because they'll always get more money there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting question, why Apple doesn't match the current market price. But yeah, I can tell you that's my guess.
I think it would make sense that it would always bump up the price, but the budgets of the state-sponsored adversaries are also limited, and when you consider that Apple as a single entity is $1 trillion corporation, it's probably one of the largest it's definitely one of the largest and probably the largest corporation in the world that sells phones.
Mm-hmm.
And the budget of the NSA is somewhere, or the entire intelligence community in the United States is somewhere between $50 and $100 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, Apple should always be able to match whatever any government agency is willing to throw at it, because like a government agency, even so secretive as the NSA or the CIA, they have to work with a certain budget, and also when they are buying these exploits and when they use them in the wild, it's already lost. So there's only so many times they can use a certain exploit before it gets discovered and
Mm-hmm.
patched. So they should really pick their targets. When Apple, what happens when Apple matches the market price, what I would say in theory is that Apple bumps up the price to 2 million, and then the US government says, okay, but we really need that exploit, so they bump up the price to 4 million. So now it's twice as expensive for the US government to hack somebody, and that in itself makes hacking more targeted, more selective, and less massively exploitable.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's the case anyway with these kinds of exploits, because whoever bought them doesn't want to waste them. So if you just like target everyone with it, it's going to be detected really fast, and we're going to have nothing, no benefit from it. So I think that from what I've heard, they're really, really cautious with how they use that and use these exploits. Again, there's a really interesting episode of the Darknet Diaries podcast where someone from an intelligence agency tells the story of a hack, and where you get a glimpse of how they decide if they're going to use an exploit or not. And it also involves like how high is the probability that it's going to be detected, that the exploit is going to be wasted because it's going to be found by an antivirus and analyzed and all that stuff. So they're really careful with that. And I think if you fork out $1 million, then this is not going to go into bulk anything. It's going to just be targeted anyway, because that's so much money, and they don't want to waste it.
Yeah.
on anyone.
Yeah, that's somehow true. Well, it's more than somehow true, but I'm always thinking about the most recent Chinese hack in the Uyghur community, and where they targeted potentially thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, definitely dozens of thousands of visitors of Muslim websites in China, and they were able to hijack their iPhones remotely with no user interaction, and
Yeah,
that's really scary. But what
it
I
is.
what I think about is most of the hacking done today is done by people. It's always, some security engineers probably writing the code, probably, you know, being given these expensive tools and trying to throw them at people that they are targeting. But we are at the brink of the artificial intelligence taking over every aspect of our lives. And do you think that this is going to be taken over by AI as well?
There's was a really interesting contest, I think, funded by the U.S. military research organization, DARPA, and they had a contest of AI computers hacking each other. That was really interesting. The thing with AI is that AI is such a buzzword. What's going on actually is just machine learning. So the concept of that is normally you have a problem, and then you write code to produce a solution. But what you do with machine learning is you give a computer the problem and the solution, and then you tell it to find a way how it can come from that problem to the solution. And the product of this machine learning phase is this tool, like how to solve a certain problem. And the problem with that is that the data we give this machine for it to learn is always going to be biased and always going to be broken to some extent. And so it will never be perfect. It will never be able to learn by itself. Machines can only learn what we teach them to learn. There's no perpetual process of becoming better and better and better and reinventing itself. That doesn't really work with machines. So I'm not seeing AI soon in that area. Well, there will be, and there is lots of machine learning going on, which is really helpful for security because it helps you digest loads of data and find needle in the haystack, which is an attacker in a big corporate network. But AI, in the sense of like how we're used to from sci-fi movies, no.
Okay.
That's not on the horizon.
So there is no AI hacking into, security systems, airplanes, power grids. This is not going to happen.
No.
Okay.
What you can do is you can build a huge program where you automate loads of things of that process, but a fully kind of self-aware AI that you just tell hack the system and it'll do everything itself. No.
Okay.
That's not going to happen.
Okay. So regarding security, most of it is done through encryption when it comes to internet. You mentioned HTTPS, and people don't really have a good understanding of how strong encryption really is, and it's just a pure fact that modern cryptography cannot be broken mathematically. It's just so strong that you can try to like go around it, try to break through the implementation software, but not through the actual encryption function. But there's a problem with that when it comes to progress with technology, because we are only using our current technology to develop encryption algorithms, but the new technology can break our old technology and break our old encryption algorithms. Do you worry about that?
Not really.
Okay.
Because there are good ways to mitigate that, and there's lots of work going on right now in that area. So to give you some background information, what for example quantum computers will be better at is solving specific mathematical problems, and these problems are the basis for current for some of the current cryptography systems, especially RSA and elliptic curve cryptography. They're both based on problems that are difficult to solve for a normal computer, but not difficult to solve by a quantum-based computer, because it just calculates differently. We're still far away from a quantum computer being able to do that, really far away, but it may come in the future. So we are preparing, and what we're doing now is switching to mathematical problems that don't have this weakness at all, and that can only be broken by exhaustive search. And every computer, no matter what technology, has the same problem with exhaustive search, because it just has to like go through everything and try every combination of the lock. There's no shortcut, and that's the problem with the current mathematical problems, that there is a shortcut. It's just too slow to calculate on current hardware, and quantum computers could solve that. But with the new systems, that wouldn't be a problem anymore. The problem with the new systems right now is that either they're really slow, so really computational expensive, or the key sizes are really big. And currently you either can have a key of 1 megabyte, or you can have it take really long. Both aren't that great, but you can use them. It's okay. So I think both Google and Cloudflare, I'm sure about Google, have already tested like what they call post-quantum key exchange in the wild, and it worked pretty good. There was an experiment and it worked. So we'll be ready whenever that comes along. And the NIST, the U.S. Standards Institute, is in the process of creating a standard for that. There were 2 rounds already in this competition. There will be a 3rd round, and they expect to have a candidate by 2022, I think. And that's when greater adoption will start with that. On the other side, so these are like all the asymmetric crypto systems. All the symmetric crypto systems aren't vulnerable to quantum computers. Well, not in the sense like the others are. We just have to double the key length and we're safe. So instead of AES 128, you'd use AES 256, which already is a standard and used by loads of companies. So on the symmetric part, we're safe. There's no problem there. It's all the asymmetric cryptography that people are worried about.
Okay.
Maybe to give you one more bit of context, what these people are most worried about is that depending on the information you want to protect, you want to protect it for not a week or a month, but maybe for 20 years or 30 years. And that's why big organizations and governments are a bit scared, because they want all their secrets to be secure for 30, 40, 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
and more. And that is where, when someone right now would, like the NSA does, like bulk collect all the internet, and in 20 years they have a quantum computer, they can retrospectively decrypt everything that happens today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem with the ability of like just saving everything,
Mm-hmm.
just waiting for the possibility to decrypt it at some point in the future.
Do you think there's any reasonable value in this, like for an agency to maintain this data for so long? I mean, it has to be expensive to maintain digital data for 20 years just to be able to decrypt them in the future.
I don't think there's value in bulk collection, but for single secrets that will still be interesting in 20 years, yeah, that's totally a thing.
What kind of
So if one government breaks into another government and like copies a couple petabytes from there, which is really hard to do because that's a lot of data. But a couple petabytes isn't a lot of data. You can hold on for that forever.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, governments and big corporations are scared.
That's really weird that we do this, like as people. That's like I always wonder what the motive behind this is, like what the mind behind this is. Like we need to keep all the data, like we need to just in case we'll be able to, even if it's encrypted, we cannot use it now, we cannot use it in decades, but just in case we'll be able to use it in the future. And who knows, like whoever is in charge in the future, it can be a totally different person, it can be a totally different system with totally different values than those that we have today, and yet we still do it. That is very unsettling. Is this something that triggered you back in 2013 when Snowden leaked those details? Is this what you thought of?
I don't think I went that far back then, but it's still, if thinking about it now, it is kind of scary. But they just don't see that way. It's just they see a possibility of more power, and they're like, well, we are going to be in charge anyway, and we are the good guys, so what's the problem? So, and there's no one who looks in the future that far and sees this coming. And there are lots of like analogies to what happened pre-World War II, where also I think IBM was part of the initiative to gather data on citizens. And that data, and I think IBM provided the technology for that, to do it like in an automated way, and they then use that data later for their purposes. And at the point where they were just gathering data, there was like, okay, they're just doing this because that's a good thing. They save a lot of money. They know more about the general population, and then they can do better good. But of course, all this data then actually provided means to do very, very dark things.
Like Snowden often says that encryption works and you should use encryption, but we should say encryption works for now.
Yeah, it does, but well, we're not even sure yet if quantum computers are a possibility. We're not even sure yet that this is possible. It's still research, and as always with research, no is a valid answer. You always have to expect no, it's not possible. But at some point, it will there will be more and more powerful computers in the future, no matter what technology it's based on. So at some point there will be a problem. But for the average user, there you shouldn't really be concerned at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's nothing that's around the corner. It'll take a long time.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. So what would you say is the state of the security at the moment? Is it more secure than it was like 4 years ago? Like, obviously there is some progress in that, because we use HTTPS instead of HTTP, so that's some progress. But security is often described as a cat and mouse game, where there's always hackers are catching up, and security researchers are catching up to hackers, and then when they fix a vulnerability, then hackers find another one. So how is it right now? Is there any trend at all, or is it just all the same?
Well, I'd say we're definitely more secure today than we were some time ago, but it doesn't really, the impact isn't as expected, because there are also way more adversaries today than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an arms race, as you explained, where there's more and more security, but the all these black hat hackers are getting more and better by the minute. So,
but
it's kind of a level playing field.
Okay.
In some degree.
Okay. Because there's also like an increase in the attack surface, because we are surrounding our lives with more and more technology gadgets, and with there is an Internet of Things, and now our TV is connected to the internet. Now our fridge is connected to the internet. And we are carrying mobile devices all the time on us, and this wasn't here like 10 or 15 years ago. So my concern is like, yeah, we are improving the security of the technology, but at the same time we are exposing ourselves to more and more potential vulnerabilities and potential vectors of infection and attacks. Would you say that this is the case?
Yes, this is very true, that we especially we ourselves expose us to more technology, and with all this IoT thing, that's just the beginning. So hacking smart locks, hacking your private security cameras, that's just the beginning, and this is gonna get worse in the future, I'm sure. But there will be also more security. So there will only be, so security is most of the time it's just a reaction to what happens. So
that's true.
And it'll also always be catching up and not planning ahead. And that's a bit of an issue I see, especially in the IoT category of things. So it would be great to have standards and thought through systems in that regard. But that's also where with IoT there's so much human interaction, and there's such proximity to humans that humans will always break security.
Yeah.
And no matter how good the tools are, humans will always fail at security to some extent, and that's what's called an operational security, where the human part comes in and has to do its part, and if it doesn't matter how good your cryptography is. If you leave your private key unprotected somewhere, there's just no one can help you if you do that. And that's really a big part of security, is not just tools. It's a lot of processes and guidelines and how you as a person work with these tools. If you use the tools wrong, then they will not provide any security.
So, speaking of operation security, what is this security then? What can people do to be more secure? Should they just cut the wire and just live like in the old days, or is it even meaningful to try to be secure on the internet, or is there something that people can actually do to be reasonably secure?
There are a lot of ways that people can actually be more secure, and I think the most basic thing I'd start with here is that you have to be careful who you trust, and especially if you look at services and companies, you might want to check out what their values are and if they do good security. So you don't have to do security all by yourself. We as consumers outsource in some sense most of our security, and we have to be careful whom we trust our security with. So and that's, I think, one basic advice that goes a long way. Just be careful which companies you trust and which services you use and which devices you buy. That kind of a basic thing. And then of course you need some sort of basic understanding of how these systems work, because if you just don't know that a private key is to be held private, then you're gonna have a problem.
Yeah. That's easier said than done.
It is definitely. And I think that is kind of the most. I think it's the hardest part right now for people, like average people, like you and me, in security, is that all these tools that exist out there are just so complex and difficult, and that even if you use them, it might not even help you, and that we need tools that are really easy to use and that can be understood by the user.
Yeah, this is going to be difficult for most people because when you think about security of things that you own, like you put your phone into your pocket and you think that it is secure, like it's in your pocket, it's a physical device, it's right there. But there is something behind the scenes going on that you are not consciously aware of and you cannot consciously monitor. And that's the fact that your device is constantly connected to the network and it's broadcasting all this data. And I don't think that most people who use these devices are even thinking about this. So that's what makes
it. Totally. Like a really great example is if people would know that if they're walking around the mall, that the Wi-Fi of their phone is used to track them and to generate data about them, well, they would turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
But they just don't know.
Or yeah. No, I just wanted to say that even if we tell them that they track you, they will be like, so what? Like they give me a service, but they don't know that data has value to somebody, and pretty much anybody can get hands on that data and use it against them, or use it for their benefit at the expense of the owner of the phone.
That's the other problem, that a lot of people aren't aware of the value of the data and especially what harm it can do to them. Mm-hmm. And that I think that's a very interesting topic, especially in the age where there are leaks everywhere and there's tracking and bug collection everywhere, and all this data then is bought by various parties, and it has real world impact. And I think Germany for some time now is using an algorithm to to check if you're worthy of a loan or not. And as explained before, these algorithms are always biased because the data they're trained with is biased. So, of course, your gender plays a big role in that algorithm. Of course, your address, where you live, plays a big role, and all these things just lock you into your social stage you're in, and you won't ever be able to get out of there because you're restricted from.
Yeah, there's actually a very recent example with Amazon that we're trying to create some sort of an AI that would help them hire more people, and that AI almost always excluded women and resumes with women's colleges or women's degrees, and that was really crazy. And they started they wanted to intervene within this AI. They wanted to sort of like rewrite it so that it doesn't discriminate women, but they couldn't. It just, the AI automatically learned itself to prefer men, and people don't realize that this is how the data is used. It's not just that it provides a service that they are currently using, but there's a whole lot of things going in the background that they are not aware of, and the data is being used to make decisions about them without them.
Exactly.
And
the point is that this is always trained on data, and data is always biased. So there's no way this can work. There is, as a little reference on the side, there are people working on an alternative where these machine learning processes, they don't produce the solution itself, the weighted solution, but they generate code that then does it, and not a neural network. So in the neural network, we can't really understand, but if such a system would produce code, then someone could go over that code, audit that code, and remove everything that discriminates. But we're still not there yet, and there's still lots of work to be done in that area. Mm-hmm. As of right now, you have to expect that everything that's tagged AI or algorithm or intelligent, that is actually discriminating.
Yeah, especially considering that most of these algorithms and machine learning systems are written by mostly young male, mostly from the same kind of background. They're probably mostly white or mostly from middle class. So it's kind of like a bubble, and they have their own perception of the world. And and there's no
I just remember that really funny example just a couple of weeks ago from Apple, where they have this automatic system that determines your limit on your credit card, and it rated women a lot worse than men.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah,
everywhere. It's what? Don't you have enough people that understand how this technology works? I'm surprised that they didn't that they actually fell for that and didn't know that these things are biased. But wait.
So are you saying that they should not have done it at all? They should not have put an AI near this thing?
Well, probably that would be the only clean solution.
Okay. Yeah. Which also
they could have maybe worked around it for it to not be that obvious, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't make it better.
Yeah.
But it was just really embarrassing for them.
it was really obvious and obnoxious how the differences were shown. Like it was really like several orders of magnitude worse for women. And I noticed it was like it was like all over Twitter and social media. And I think I caught it on YouTube somewhere that people were complaining about this. This is really embarrassing. So I think that this is as good a time as any to give people some advice on how they can actually improve their security on the internet and digital security in general. So what what's there for the general audience of my channel and people listening to this video? What can we teach them today that can help them improve their digital security?
I think I'd like to start with the concept of threat modeling and operational security. We already talked about operational security briefly before. And so OPSEC, which is operational security, is the whole part that's not technical, but that's where it's about the people and the interaction between people and the computer. So it doesn't matter how good your antivirus is, if you open every attachment of every spam email, you are going to have a bad time, and there's no technology that can protect you from that. So there's always some responsibility for people to also be part of that security process. There's no one-click install, I'm safe thing. It's a lot about awareness, a lot about processes, and having a basic understanding of how to go about the digital world. With that said, I'd like to go into the threat models, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. So we have defined 3 threat models that we'd like to work with when going through a couple topics later. The threat models are a way to kind of define who you want to protect against. So you don't want to just go full security all the time, because that's just so inconvenient and will disrupt your life in such a way that you just don't want to use anything anymore. So you'll have to find a level, like a threat model that suits your needs and your concerns. And then you can work with that. And with that threat model, you can evaluate how far you want to go into this security topic, and how far you want to commit yourself in using certain tools and following certain guidelines and processes.
And
so
that threat model can change depending on your circumstances. It doesn't have to be rigid, like one threat model for life. Like you can use one for one specific situation. You can move somewhere else into another country and you need to increase your security there. And like you face different adversaries in different parts of the world and in different in different time in your life.
Yeah, definitely. So you should evaluate or reevaluate your threat model every once in a while to see if it still fits your current life.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start. The first threat model is probably the most interesting for our listeners here. Is an actor that has low resources. So the actor probably will not have thousands of dollars to spend. Maybe he'll spend a couple hundred at max. But he's active, so he's not just like gobbling up whatever he can find, but he's actually after a target and trying to damage or go after that target specifically. So for example, you might be targeted by a stalker who tries to find everything that you have online, or you have an abusive ex-partner that tries to find out where you now live, or you have neighbors that are kind of nosy and maybe a bit too nosy, and maybe don't like you and want to dig up some bad stuff about you. Or there's a colleague that wants to discredit you because they want that position that you should get in a couple of months, and they want to discredit you by releasing documents about you that will not show you in your best light, and probably will have your bosses rethink the decision. So there are like so many possibilities of what this actor could look like. The two things that this actor is about is that there's low resources involved, so there's not lots of knowledge, there's not lots of money, but the actor is dedicated, has like mostly personal motive, and really like wants to get at you, and doesn't mind spending every weekend doing just that. So that's a pretty scary picture painted here. But I think you know I now have a feeling of what that actor will look like. We will then later here and there when we talk about tools and stuff, we will tell you what threat model these tools are for, and how they should be used.
Yeah, I'll just mention some other examples that I think are quite eye-opening for the viewers. It's also, internet stalkers and harassers. There are numerous campaigns that you can read about online about, several victims being harassed, having their information released, being doxxed. Whether it's journalists or some sort of anybody who basically have some following online or have some personality online, or it doesn't have to be big. It can be quite small, but you piss off the wrong guy, the wrong crowd, or the wrong guy, and now you can have your information released, and the crowd that will use that information to harass you, your family. They will send you horrible stuff straight to your door. And like all of this happens on daily basis. There are cases of ex spouses that are still clinging onto their old love, and they are harassing their new families, and it can be really, really crazy. But another example is that there's actually a whole market for businesses that are offering their customers to spy on their spouses, their children, their friends, and that is crazy. Like businesses are actually making money from people who want to spy on other people, and
yeah, that's really scary. And the EFF is doing a lot in that direction at the moment. And I think one of their board members, or was it like someone really high up in EFF, has written that kind of on their flags, and they're really campaigning against that and trying to do something against all that business.
Yeah, but right now there is not really much protection, and you are basically on your own when it comes to this.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yes and no. One more thing I want to mention is revenge porn. That kind of falls into that model.
Mm-hmm.
And well, if you find yourself confronted with revenge porn, or like a stalker, I'd recommend you to reach out to the EFF, or reach out to an organization called the Badass Army. which is a group of women that help victims of revenge porn, and I think they're doing a tremendous work there. So just a small plug for them here.
That's very good that there are these organizations, but also it kind of proves that the system is very broken and very sad because
It is.
This revenge porn examples have to happen on some sort of platforms, and nothing exists, autonomously on the internet. Everything is connected. So if somebody has a website, it is hosted somewhere. So you should be able to go to that hosting provider and request them to take down the website. But they it might take weeks for them, or they might never reply until they see a court order or police order.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it happens on Reddit might take it down. It might take too long to take it down. It might never happen. Well, that on Reddit it's probably less likely, but there are plenty of websites where your something like this can just reappear, and even if it's taken down, it's on the internet. People always take copies, and it's always being re-uploaded constantly. So people should really take their security very seriously when it comes to this, because I would say that even if there are steps that you can take, and even if there are organizations, the harm that can be done is still very real, and it can, I know that people have taken their own lives, or it has completely destroyed their psyches because of what people on the internet are doing. And even if the original perpetrators are caught, the
damage is done.
The damage is done, yeah. And it's very hard to just walk away from that.
Yeah.
So it's better to prevent that from happening in the first place.
Yeah. So to elaborate like how these actors work, there's a technique that's called OSINT, or open source intelligence, which describes trying to find everything about a target, in our case a person, that is available publicly online. And you'd be surprised like how much information about you is online, and especially with all these data leaks and password leaks, this can be taken a step further, and someone might even try to take over an account of yours with an old password. Yeah. So we'll get the password later, but just like that's the main tool these actors use is open source intelligence. So they look for everything that's somehow available online, and that is somehow can get about you.
This can be even like on your public social media profiles, or like
for example,
they can be your friend on Facebook and they can find that information.
Yeah.
Okay,
so let's move on to threat model 2, which is like a high resource and passive actor. High resource means in the millions at least, and passive means this actor doesn't have a specific interest about you, but just gobbles up everything that this actor happens to come across. So this is mostly companies that gather data. So it's, of course, the usual suspects of Facebook and Google, but there are lesser known companies in that regard, like Palantir, which, well, their mission is just to get more and more and more data and sell it to other companies. And kind of a bit of a scary name for the company, I think. So if you don't get the reference, it's about this glass ball of Lord of the Rings, where that wizard can like see everything he wants to and view every place he wants to, and that's kind of what they're aiming for. They want to know everything about every person, and I just don't like the sound of that. So yeah, so that their companies also in that threat model, that threat actor, we have governments such as the NSA, which just collects everything because it might need it later for whatever reason. And of course, what fuels all this is this fuels all these data leaks. So we have all these companies gathering data, and then this data sometimes leaks to the public, which then also gets back to the first threat actor, where then open source intelligence can find that data and then make it available to this threat actor. So it's connected on some level to the first threat actor. But so this is just passive. Nobody's out for you directly, but will take everything that you happily provide to them.
Yeah, I've actually, I'm again going to say that this is another business opportunity for multi-billion-dollar markets, where you have data brokers that are making millions of dollars just gathering data, but they're also like gathering like government data, everything they can collect, and these questionnaires that are supposed to be anonymous, but there's your email address, so there's no anonymous questionnaire. If you receive something through an email or on social media and you fill out that questionnaire, it is most likely being sold to a data broker, and that data broker is going to sell that to someone else. So this is another like dimension of our reality that's kind of crazy, and makes no sense that we are having billions poured into just stalking people. Yep. Passively though. Yeah. So it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Passively in this case means that they do it to everybody. They don't just do it to you. So that's what makes it okay.
Yeah. So they say. The third threat model is the rarest but most dangerous one is a threat actor that has high resources, is willing to spend them, and is active. So the only threat actor that normally fills this role is a government that's after you, because they've lots of money, and if they target you, then they will probably succeed. And there's not a lot you can do if you're not an expert yourself. So we're not going to talk about the threat model a lot, just mentioning it here, and may reference it later. What's important for that threat model is that we often have some kind of false sense of security. So we think, hey, about a Mac, about an iPhone, nobody can hack me. Well, we've seen in the last couple weeks that this definitely isn't true. And just keep in mind that everything is theoretically hackable, and if you just throw enough money at the problem, it will eventually solve itself.
Yeah.
So that's important thing to put here, that it's security is not about being unhackable. It's making hacking you so expensive that the threat actor will stop pursuing his goal.
Or also meaningless, because even if they successfully breach through the security, they are not going to get any meaningful information that they can use against you. So
yes,
it could it could be said that if this is your threat model, high high resources active adversary like a state-sponsored government agency, then you should be prepared that, or you should be ready that if you don't want them to see something, you should not have it. It shouldn't exist. That's probably like you should either destroy it or not engaging it at all. That would be like the ultimate advice for this threat model.
Yes, that will be the safe side, but there will be situations where, well, taking that route isn't possible,
Yeah.
or isn't what you think is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So,
This,
but yes,
yeah,
the best thing is to not have anything an attacker wants. He'll leave you alone.
this threat model is very common depending on your social status and geographical location. So
Yes, that's true.
So this is a threat model for all of these, S&P 500 companies CEOs, the top 500 CEOs of the world. This is definitely the case for many journalists who are actually doing the work of a journalist and are questioning the power and are investigating people in high positions. This is the case for them. And it is the case for many people who are living in not necessarily democratic countries, authoritarian regimes, of course, but also countries with huge corruption or a lot of influence from the mob, or like you can have mafia bosses coming after you. They could potentially have a lot of resources on their hands to try to get you. Not as much as state-sponsored government agency, but still a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That just to give people idea like who this threat model is for.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That's really good information.
Yeah, it's just that like it's also to dismantle the argument like, well, if the government is coming after you, you are probably hiding something that you shouldn't have done. But that's not always the case. People in power go after people who are not in power, and it's not always justified. It's rarely justified, actually.